Good morning, Unity. I'm Jonathan Purcell, Reverend Wendy's son. She'll be on in just a moment, so sit back, hang tight, and get comfortable with your loved ones. The Unity Center live streams its Sunday services every Sunday during quarantine at 10 a.m. If you are watching a recording of this, it is posted on the Unity Center's Facebook page and their YouTube channel after the service every Sunday. If you're watching one of those recordings, consider sharing it or liking on Facebook and answering your favorite question that Wendy has asked today. And if you're on the YouTube page, consider subscribing so you don't miss any of the Unity Center's fantastic content that is published. Take care.
Good morning, Unity family. Boy, this is getting to feel somewhat normal, but I'm still ready to be back at our beautiful Unity Center campus in San Diego. And if you are watching us for the very first time this morning, a very warm and special welcome to you. If you're not already part of a spiritual community and you live in the San Diego area, I hope you'll consider joining us some Sunday when we're able to hold services live at the Unity Center. We're going to start with the striking and the playing of our antique Tibetan singing bowl. And we use this as a way to help us just really acknowledge that we are participating in something that is devoted to our spiritual growth and development. And it's kind of a way to transition from whatever it was we were just doing to being present and open and receptive to the experience that God would have us have together today. So I invite you to listen to these sounds. Namaste. Rather than doing a short centering prayer, I wanted to acknowledge Memorial Day tomorrow with you. And I especially wanted to do so by sharing a poem written by one of our members, and I share it almost in the context of a prayer. So Daniel Paikopoulos, thank you for sharing this with us. And I had asked Daniel to say a few words about himself that I could share with you before reading this poem, this prayer. So these are Daniel Paikopoulos' words. I am a multiple Purple Heart U.S. Marine, home awaiting orders, posted in an area of 1967 Vietnam, which resulted in my battalion suffering 90% casualties. My final medal was earned by mortars landing literally on me, and I had a near-death experience, floating above my body on the battlefield and meeting my mother, who had died 9 years before, and she sent me back to my physical self. I grew up in a house with more books than television and have always enjoyed poetry. While in hospitals for a year after Vietnam, I read a lot, listened to a poet on Chicago radio, eventually returning to college and taking classes in creative writing and Victorian poetry. I write every day, still part of my therapeutic process, 52 years on, still part of my unfoldment. Sometimes I think my work is pretty good, but I enjoy more reading the poems of others. Well, Daniel, we want to enjoy listening to your poem. And Daniel, thank you for being willing to help my day yesterday in the scattering of my father's ashes. Thank you for being willing to help to make that special, one Marine to another. Here's his poem. Memorial Day, a few moments dedicated to the dead, those who fell, long before their natural closing hour. Far too many have fallen, many for the sake of the survivors, all for concepts too oft forgotten. Now it's the duty of the living to remember the departed, to feel blessed by their farewell gift. Beyond mere words, we can honor them by nurturing their families, by caring for their comrades, by cherishing their memories. Our most useful, worthy, loving duty is to never forget, despite war continuing fresh upon us, even as a nation seeks to heal, steadfastly striving for peace, never overlooking the gifts of the fallen. I know who they were, every sister, every brother. Mortars for breakfast, rockets at lunchtime, rifle by fire, artillery around 9. Due to them I am strong. Because of them I belong, owing to their courageous soul. I am left complete and whole. We breathed the same air, shared the same care, fought in the same place. Thanks to them, I continue with dreams of love, with tools of hope, with weapons of grace. Namaste. I invite you to take just a deep breath in as we remember together the significance of those who paid the ultimate sacrifice, those who came before us and have made our way a little bit easier today for their gift of their sacrifice. As we move into our focus this morning, which is going to be built around one of the chapters in my book, Ask Yourself This, we're going to be looking at questions to help tap into our inner creative genius. And to get us in that space, I want to share with you a piece of music from recording artist, New Thought artist, Faith Rivera. The name of the song is I Will Surrender.
I will surrender to my greatest, highest good. I will release any fear that blocks my way. For every step I take is taken in pure faith, and I am stronger every moment, every day. My mind is willing and my heart is open wide. I trust my instincts and let spirit be my guide. I vow to live a life that's real and pure and free, as I continue walking in this mystery. I surrender to my greatest, highest good. I release any fear that blocks my way, for every step I take is taken in pure faith, and I am grateful every moment, every day. There may be walls, there may be roadblocks in my way, but I can choose to take a higher path each day. And now I know what I thought was safe and sound was only habit and regret that held me down. I will surrender to my greatest, highest good. I will release any fear that blocks my way, for every step I take is taken in pure faith, and I am kinder every moment, every day. I'm more loving every moment, every day. I surrender every moment, every day.
And thank you, Faith Rivera. Well, I did have some readings. I'll be right back. Well, so much for being in the flow of getting used to doing the service this way. I do not seem to have the readings that I had selected for you for today's lesson, but that's all right. We're going to be moving in just a few moments to some ideas that I want to share with you about tapping your inner genius. And I do have another piece of music that I wanted to share with you as we get ready to go into. Are those the readings for today? Thank you. It's wonderful to have a husband who's so helpful. So here are the readings for today. The first one is from author Jean Houston. We all have the same extraordinary encoded within us, waiting to be released. Jean Houston used to write a lot about the fact that we are encoded with great genius and great creativity. Here's one from Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Neither lofty degree of intelligence, nor imagination, nor both together go to the making of genius. Love, love, love. That is the soul of genius. Here's one from Abraham Lincoln. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. Here's one from George Patton. When in doubt, observe and ask questions. When certain, observe at length and ask many more questions. Here's one from Albert Cézanne B. Georges from the book The Living Good, The Scientist Speculates. Discovery consists of seeing what everybody has seen and thinking what nobody has thought. Here's one from the late Buckminster Fuller. Humanity is acquiring the right technology for all the wrong reasons. And from Henry David Thoreau, there are 1,000 hacking at the branches of the evil to one who is striking at the root. And so all of these are going into helping us go deeper into ourselves and understand better the creativity and the innate genius that does reside within us, and being aware of what it takes to be able to access that, the blocks that need to be removed, and how we need to open up to be able to listen in and listen for that creative spark. We're going to move into a time of meditation together right now. I invite you, if you're not already in a very comfortable seated position, to do so. And our meditation practice is a practice of mindfulness. It's a practice of being aware of the breath as we take it into our bodies and aware of the breath as we let it go, using this simple practice to help us relax and center, to let go of any of the things that may be troubling us right now, to create that experience of inner peace. And so we're going to have a little bit of background music from our music director, Janet Hammer. I invite you now to go ahead and close your eyes and just sit back, relax, and take a nice, deep and mindful breath in, and then let that breath go. And take another deep and mindful breath in. And let that breath go. And another deep and mindful breath in. And let that breath go. Allow your attention to move ever inward with each conscious and mindful breath. A steady and gentle focus, not forced. Aware of the breath in, aware of the breath out. And as you continue to breathe mindfully, let me introduce a practice we use often at the Unity Center. A practice of 3 very conscious exhalations, with the first being the feeling of letting go, with the second, the feeling of being fully present, and with the third, the feeling of opening up. So breathing in mindfully and deeply, and letting that breath go, and really feeling a sense of release. Breathing in deeply again, and letting that breath go, and being fully present right here. Breathing in deeply again, releasing that breath, feeling a sense of opening up. Continuing at your own pace, mindful of the breath in, mindful of the breath out. Releasing. Being present. And opening up. releasing, being present, and opening up. Allow your attention to drift to the area of the heart, the center of your chest. Imagine that each mindful breath moves in and through the area of the heart. Again, a gentle, not forced attention. And with your attention still focused on the breath and your attention placed in the area of the heart, practice holding a positive feeling, ones that are known to be helpful in bringing the heart into coherence, are the feelings of gratitude, of compassion, joy, and peace. And so whatever feeling is one that you would like to embody today, imagine that you are breathing that feeling into your body and breathing it out, ever aware of the precious ebb and flow of breath. Continuing now, still in the practice of mindfulness, with attention focused in the area of your heart, practicing now with only the sound of music in the background. Preparing now with a deep breath in and a deep breath out to bring your time of meditation to a close. Grateful for the opportunity to practice a few moments of stillness and peace. Bringing the time to close. Thank you, Spirit. And so it is. Amen and amen. Namaste. Take a moment to move around in just a little bit as you come out of your meditation experience. And if you are seated with somebody in your family, someone next to you, take a moment to greet them with the salutation, Namaste. Namaste. The divine spark in me recognizes the divine spark in you is the essence of what Namaste is all about. So I do have a message prepared for you today on the idea of tapping your inner creative genius. And there is a story I have long loved that I may or may not share with you in a lesson today, but it is very much captured in this song by Karen Taylor Good. And the name of this song is Get a Bigger Pan. Get a Bigger Pan.
Fisherman out there on the bridge, he bagged small one after small one, put him in his little fridge. Well, then he caught himself a whopper, and I watched him throw it back. I couldn't help but ask him, hey man, why'd you do that? He pulled out this little skillet and said, see, it wouldn't fit. It was none of my business, but I couldn't help but wish he'd get a bigger pan.
Get a bigger pan, huh? Maybe get the biggest pan, right? I actually remember hearing that as a story many, many years ago from my Unity minister, the late Reverend Robert Stevens. And that story stuck with me then, and then to discover that Karen Taylor Good had written this beautiful song about it. I think it contains such an important message for us. Many times we do think too small. But here are some ideas that I want to share with you this morning to help you think bigger, to tap into your inner genius, your inner creativity. So I wrote this book called Ask Yourself This, and it's a book that's really, it's a short book, it's a quick read, but it's not necessarily a quick application, because the secret of the book, if you will, is the power of the questions. And the questions that I pose in each of the different chapters help you to get in touch with a deeper knowing inside of yourself, a deeper desire, a deeper wondering, a deeper creativity. And so these questions I'll be sharing with you this morning are about tapping your inner genius, your inner creativity. But first I want to just suggest that there are some obvious things, at least they're obvious to me, that block our creativity. And see if you can relate to any of these, and see if you can identify any of them that maybe you have a tendency toward. Always needing to have the right answer. That can block creativity. Thinking only in terms of what's logical. That can constrict creative thinking. Feeling you always have to follow every rule. That's a sure way to limit creativity. Being only practical. Being uncomfortable with ambiguity, thinking that making a mistake is somehow wrong, or thinking that play is frivolous, or being afraid of being foolish, or thinking, well, I'm just not creative. Well, that last is not at all true. All you have to do is look at your life, right? We're creating and manifesting all the time. It takes great creativity to create some of the problems that we experience in our lives. We are all creative. So those are just some of the things that kind of get in our way of tapping our own innate genius and creativity. And maybe you noticed kind of I see myself leaning that way. So just keep that in mind. If you do, those are the kinds of things you want to try to loosen or change a bit. But there are also some very general, fundamental elements of genius and creativity that seem to be true all across the board of those who really do tap into their inner creativity, regardless of what field they are applying that creativity and genius to. The one that's almost entirely universal is curiosity. To tap into your creativity, to tap into your own innate genius, requires being curious. And you know, when we're little, when we're children, we are naturally curious. Much to our parents' challenge sometimes, little kids are forever asking the question, why? Why? Why this? How that? Einstein once wrote, I have no special talents, I am only passionately curious. Einstein saying of himself, I have no special talent, but I am passionately curious. At the root of Leonardo da Vinci's greatness really was his unrelenting quest for continuous learning. His unrelenting quest for continuous learning. So creativity is elemental, fundamental to tapping your creativity and your inner genius. Second is the idea of outward thinking, the idea of embracing and combining points of view and perspectives that differ from your own. Points of view and perspectives that differ from your own. In the book, Steal Like an Artist, author Austin Kleon says all creative work builds on what came before. Think about that for a moment. All creative work builds on what came before. And I would add to that it builds on what came before, but often combines and connects seemingly unrelated things. And therefore there's a spark of something new, something genius. And a third element is an element that has to do with attitude. And it's an attitude that is happy, an attitude that is positive, that leans in that direction of possibility. And these are some fundamental key elements of tapping your own inner creativity and your own inner genius. Curiosity, outward thinking, and a sense of positiveness or happiness. So here are some questions that you can begin to use to tap into a greater depth of your own creativity. And I encourage you, as you think about these questions, to really focus on one or two that you think would be most helpful to you. Here's the first one. Is there another way to approach this? Is there another way to approach this? Whatever you're facing in your life right now, it's a problem, a difficulty, Is there another way to approach it than the way that I have been approaching it? When the beautiful city of St. Petersburg was being laid out in the early 18th century, at that time it was very popular for big, beautiful cities to have wide boulevards, beautiful boulevards. But also, there was not the modern equipment then or explosives then to move away boulders that might be in the way. And particularly in the case of St. Petersburg, the area that the city fathers wanted to lay out this particularly beautiful wide boulevard, there was a huge boulder right in the middle of it. And the challenge, because they didn't have modern equipment in the 18th century and because they didn't have powerful explosives, was how to move this boulder out of the way. And so they put it out to bid, and the bids were really, really high, but all except for one. And the lowest bid was from not an expert in the day, but from a peasant. And so the people in charge figured, well, let's give it a shot. Let's go with the lowest bid. And so the next day, the peasant came back with a bunch of other peasants, all with shovels in their hand. And they began to dig right in front of the boulder a huge hole, digging and digging and digging and digging and digging, and at one point making sure that they propped up the big boulder with timbers so it wouldn't roll into the hole before they were ready. But when the hole was big enough, they released the timbers, and gravity doing what gravity does, the boulder rolled into the hole. They covered up what needed to be covered up and carted away the rest of the dirt. Was there another way to look at that situation, to approach it? Certainly. All those who came in with the highest bid were trying to figure out how to move the boulder from side to side, move it out of the way. But this peasant had a very curious and creative mind, right? And thought, well, maybe there's another way to approach this rather than side to side. How about down? And it worked. And it worked. Or consider this way of approaching a problem. This one really puts a smile on my face. It's about a city in the Netherlands that had a problem with litter. And so the sanitation, and if you've ever been in the Netherlands, it's an immaculate country. And so the sanitation department tried doubling the fines, for people who littered. And not just doubling the fines for littering, but increasing the number of sanitation workers to go and ticket them if they were littering. But it didn't work. And so they went back to the drawing board, and some suggested, well, maybe rather than punishing, so see, this is a different approach, right? Maybe rather than punishing those who litter, maybe we should reward those who put their litter in the trash cans. So they started to think about that. How could we do this differently? How could we reward? They thought, well, maybe they could create a trash can that would dispense coins every time somebody put a piece of trash in. But they found that that would be too cost prohibitive. And then somebody came up with a completely different way of approaching it, right? And it was, well, what if we reward them by every time somebody puts a piece of trash into the trash can, it plays a joke. And then we change the jokes every few weeks. You know what? It worked. People would go all around town picking up the litter, putting it in the trash can because they got the benefit of a joke, right? Is there another way to approach this? What are you dealing with in your life right now? Maybe through this pandemic, you are one of so many who have lost your job or who have been furloughed through no fault of your own. Maybe you've been looking at it in just one way, just in terms of what you have lost, or just in terms of maybe it felt completely personal or very unfair to you. But whatever that may be, what might be a different way to approach this? And can you challenge yourself to push the pause button, to give yourself a little more time and space to be curious about how to approach it differently? Here's another story about the value of pausing before jumping right in to solve a problem. Oftentimes when we jump right in to solve a problem, we shortchange ourselves the opportunity to be able to think about it differently. And right, this first question I'm giving you is there another way to approach this problem? So there was a class of boys in a German primary school who were being very, very noisy. It was a math class, and their teacher decided to punish them for being so noisy. And so she gave them a very difficult assignment. And the assignment was they were to add together all of the numbers from 1 to 100. All of the numbers from 1 to 100. And all the boys sat down very quickly and started to add 1 plus 2 plus 3 and all the way up, except for one boy who kind of stopped, and the teacher noticed that he was just kind of looking out into space. And now all of a sudden he started to write down rather quickly and turned in his paper to the teacher, and his answer was right. And it was the only answer that was turned in. His was a first, and the only answer that was turned in that was correct. And the teacher said, well, how did you do this so fast? And the young boy said, well, I just thought about it for a moment because maybe there was a pattern here. And I noticed, well, 100 plus 1 is 101. 99 plus 2 is 101. 98 plus 3 is 101. All the way down to 51 plus 50 is 101. So I have 101 times 50, which is 5,050. Would he have gotten that if he had meticulously gone through the way the other boys had? Well, if all of his addition was correct, he certainly could have approached it that way. But instead, without even realizing what he was doing necessarily, he was giving himself some mental space to think about a different approach. I believe this is very much a spiritual practice, to step back and rethink, to step back and reframe. If you believe, as I do and as we teach in Unity, that there is incredible wisdom within each and every one of us, then you know that there is more wisdom within you than you are usually tapping into. But in order to tap into it, you got to do something different. And for most of us, that's changing our automatic way of responding to things, getting quiet for a moment, getting reflective, and giving some space for something new to arise. Second question, what assumptions am I making? What assumptions am I making? Ask that of yourself. What assumptions am I making? My dad used to always say, you know what they say about those who assume they make a out of you and me. Yes, fill in the blank. They make a you, an ass, out of you and me, those who make an assumption. I remember a story that I heard of a young couple who had only been married for a few years, and they were making pot roast. The husband's favorite dish was pot roast, and the wife would make it for him on a pretty regular basis, and she would always cut the ends off of both ends of the pot roast. And one day he asked her, why do you do that? And my mom never did that. And she said, well, my mother always did that. And husband wanted to know why. She said, I don't know why, but it's the way you make pot roast. You have to cut like an inch off this end and an inch off that end and then into the oven. It goes. And so the husband said, let's call your mom and ask her why. So they call mom and ask her why. Mom says, well, that's the way you make pot roast. But why, Mom? Why do you make pot roast that way? Well, honey, I don't know. That's the way my mom made it. So they decide to call Grandma. And Grandma laughs, much like Karen Taylor Good's song, and she says, well, sweetheart, I never had very many pans and they weren't very big, so I had to cut it off to fit it in the pan. What assumptions am I making? I catch myself, and maybe you do too. You catch yourself and you go, wait a minute, I'm assuming something here that isn't so. And when I assume something, it's as if I am constricting the way my mind can work. John Gardner wrote, "The creative individual has the capacity to free himself from the web of social pressures in which the rest of us are caught. He is capable of questioning the assumptions that the rest of us accept." I think for some there's an assumption that war is always going to be with us, that we're always going to have those who suffer, that there are no answers to the really big challenges and problems in life. I refuse to believe that way. Just because we don't know how to do something now does not mean that it is unsolvable. But what is absolutely true is the more we stay in the mindset of believing that something is unsolvable, of holding the assumption that violence is ultimately the only way to peace is ridiculous. As long as we hold that, we're never going to give ourselves the space as a human family to figure the bigger issues out together. Do I assume it can't be done just because it hasn't been done before? That's what's at the heart of this. Do I assume something can't be done just because it hasn't been done before, or because I don't know how to do it? There was a time when it was believed to be absolutely true that it was impossible for a human being to run a 4-minute mile. The ancient Greeks were somewhat obsessed with the idea of being able to run that fast. And they would try all sorts of things, including having wild animals chase runners to see if they could get them to run a 4-minute mile. Serving their athletes tiger's milk, not the kind you buy in the health food store, but the real thing. How they got the milk from a mama tiger, I don't know. But they would try to do all these ridiculous things to strengthen up the runner to run that 4-minute mile, and they weren't successful. And they figured, well, it's got to be because of bone structure, or it's got to be because of wind resistance, or the inadequate lung power, so therefore it is impossible. Then comes Roger Bannister, and he breaks the 4-minute mile. Did human beings suddenly become so very different? Did wind resistance somehow begin to act differently? No. It was an assumption. It was an assumption. And what's equally amazing to me is the year after Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, hundreds of other runners did the same thing. What assumptions are you making in your own life? That you really can't live the life that you want to live because somebody told you it's just not possible at this point in your life, at this age? Don't buy into that. Don't believe that. Another question. Could they be wrong? The experts. Could they be wrong? Boy, do I remember so many times as a kid saying something to my dad. You know, they said this, or they said that, or I read that they said. And he would always challenge me and ask, who is they? Because what he was trying to get me to evaluate was to put whatever is being said in the context of how credible is that person or that resource in terms of what they are saying. And even then, are you 100% sure that what they are saying, no matter how expert they profess to be, is absolutely the way it is? Could they be wrong? I want to read you a list just to give you a greater appreciation of just how often the experts can be wrong. The abdomen, the chest, and the brain will forever be shut from the intrusion of the wise and humane surgeon, Sir John Ericsson, a British surgeon appointed to serve Queen Victoria. This telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is inherently of no value to us. A Western Union internal memo in 1876. The wireless music box has no imaginable commercial value. Who would pay for a message sent to nobody in particular? David Sarnoff. Heavier than air flying machines are impossible. Lord Kelvin, president of the Royal Society in 1895. Airplanes are interesting toys, but of no military value. Ferdinand Foch, professor of strategy. Computers in the future may weigh no more than 15 tons. Popular Mechanics forecasting the relentless march of science in 1949. I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers. Thomas Watson, chairman of IBM in 1943. But what is it good for? An engineer at IBM commenting on a microchip. The concept is interesting and well-formed, but in order to earn better than a C, the idea must be feasible. A Yale University management professor, in response to Fred Smith's paper proposing reliable overnight delivery service, and of course he went on to found Federal Express. If I had thought about it, I wouldn't have done the experiment. The literature was full of examples that said you can't do this. Spencer Silver on the work that led to the unique adhesives of 3M Post-it notes. Look at these. Now they're in every color, every size, every shape. They actually were created because of a person who also worked for 3M who sang in a choir and used to put slips of paper in his choir notebook, but they would fall out, and then he made a connection. That's another part of creativity and another part of tapping your inner genius. He remembered that Spencer at 3M had come up with this kind of adhesive that they scrapped because it wasn't strong enough to really hold anything. But Fry thought, the creator of this, well, maybe there's a way that we can use this to put a little note so I can use it as a bookmarker. He connected seemingly unrelated ideas, and we have the Post-it pad. But you know what? In order to get that off the ground, nobody thought it would fly. They thought it would be too expensive. Why would people buy a stack of papers like this when they could just stick in a scrap paper in a book? And so they decided to give free samples to secretaries, and the secretaries loved them. We told Atari, we've got this amazing thing built with some of your parts. What do you think about funding us? Or we'll give it to you. We just want to do it. Pay our salary and we'll come to work for you. They said no. So then we went to Hewlett-Packard. They said, hey, we don't need you. You haven't gone through college yet. Apple computer founder Steve Jobs on attempts to get Atari and HP interested in his and Steve Wozniak's personal computer. Everything that can be invented has been invented. The commissioner of the U.S. Office of Patents in 1899. Do we even have anything left in our houses from 1899? We're using entirely new and different things all the time, right? A few more that are my favorites. 640K ought to be enough for anybody. Bill Gates, 1981. Everything that can be invented has been invented. I think I already shared that one with you. The U.S. Office of Patents. And this last one. People will only want to shop in stores. In 1966, Time published an essay called The Futurists that looked ahead to life in the year 2000. Here's one thing they thought would be rejected by humankind. Remote shopping, while entirely feasible, will flop because women like to get out of the house, like to handle the merchandise, like to be able to change their minds. Tell that to Amazon's founder, Jeff Bezos, the one with how many billions in his bank account, right? So Can the experts be wrong? I hope to God you're saying absolutely. Does that mean that we don't seek out what might be expert opinion from time to time? No, but we don't have to overvalue it. And what we do have to begin to value even more is our own inner creativity and genius. Maybe person A over here says it can't be done, but there's something inside you that says, but I really believe it can be done. And somehow, some way, I'm going to figure it out. Last question that I have for you. Are my obstacles real or imagined? Are my obstacles real or imagined? I think a lot of times, and I catch myself on this from time to time as well, living within a mindset of imaginary obstacles, making things bigger than they really are or more solid than they really are. There was a game that used to be played in some Boy Scout troops for new Boy Scouts coming into the troop, and the game would involve an obstacle course. And so the more seasoned troop members would place a series of chairs in a kind of like an obstacle course fashion, and rather complex one, and tell the new Boy Scouts that they were going to have to wander through that obstacle course successfully from point A to point B, and so they better pay attention to the way it was laid out, because they were then going to be blindfolded and have to walk that course. And so the boys would study the pattern, and then they would be blindfolded and turned around a few times, and while they were turned around a few times, very quickly and very quietly, all the chairs would be removed. But of course, the boys with the blindfolds on didn't know that the chairs would removed. And so they'd be wandering as if they were trying to avoid this obstacle and that obstacle and the other obstacle. And it was quite funny for those who didn't have the blindfold on and knew what was going on. And I remember hearing about that and thinking, wow, you know, it's so much the way sometimes we might be operating in our own lives. We've made something to be an obstacle in our mind that maybe really isn't. Maybe there really is a way to move through it, over it, beyond it, under it, or around it. Perhaps you've heard of, I hope they don't do this way anymore, but years ago, the way elephants were trained to stay within a confined area. They would take a baby elephant, they're so cute. They would take a baby elephant and they would put a very strong metal pole in the ground. And they would take a very heavy chain and attach one end of the chain to the pole and the other end of the chain to the baby elephant's leg. And they would teach the elephant just to wander around in circle. And at first, the baby elephant would pull with all of its might and strength to try to free itself. I mean, no being likes to be encaged, right? I mean, aren't we struggling with some of that right now in shelter in place? We just want to get out. And if you're going to do that this weekend, please be safe. But anyway, those baby elephants would just pull to try to get free. And eventually they stopped trying. And over time, as the elephants grew, all the trainers needed to do, they could replace that heavy, heavy chain with a very light rope and basically a thin piece of wood in the ground. And the big elephants, despite their massive size and weight, would no longer even try to break free, because so ingrained in their mind was the belief that that same obstacle, that same barrier was there as it had been when they were little. I don't know what kind of messaging you might have gotten growing up that might cause you to think too small about yourself, or to think too small about what is possible in your life. But I hope that there's something in what I've shared with you today, or something in the questions that you ask yourself and the answers you get, that will encourage you to think bigger, to get a bigger pan, get the biggest pan you possibly can get, to have greater faith in yourself, to have greater trust in yourself. And not just so that you live a happier, more purposeful, more creative and enjoyable life, but to the extent that you live your better life, that has a powerful rippling out effect to everyone that you come in contact with, to your loved ones, to your friends, to your neighbors, to your coworkers. And to the extent that you're willing to think bigger, to the extent that you're willing to take a few more risks and dream bigger and become more creative yourself, to that extent, you help inspire others to believe in themselves as well. So quickly recapping the questions were, is there another way to approach this? What assumptions am I making? Could they be wrong? And are the obstacles real or imaginary? Remember, the elements of tapping your creative genius are curiosity, outward thinking, and positiveness. Namaste. God bless you. We come to the time in our service now where I'd like to share just a few reminders with you. I'd like to encourage you to prepare the gift that you would like to share with the center. You can send it in automatically. I'll give you some information about that later, but first a few reminders. And that is that now that San Diego County is in phase 2 plus, and we have the go-ahead, we're going to start on June 7th, not next Sunday, but the following, on June 7th, to broadcast the service live from our Unity Center campus. And so you'll be seeing, starting Sunday, June 7th, Janet Hammer, our music director, and our Soul Notes band, and myself, streaming live from the Unity Center. And we'll make sure that you know how to access us. It'll be the same way, basically, as you're accessing us now. We will wait until it is entirely safe to begin to hold in-person services. We're not ready to do that yet. Some activities for this week. Today we do have the discussion group on Zoom right after this service. You do want to register on our website or on the app. If you have questions, please type them into the chat right now, and Jenna Rowe will be happy to help you out with that. On Wednesday evening, not Thursday, on Wednesday evening, David Stanley is going to be offering his meditation hour. There's some instruction in his meditation practice itself, and then the opportunity for some questions and answers. On Thursday at noontime, Prayer Chaplain Kim Kennedy will be offering midday centering prayer. And the prayer focus for this week, I'll say the affirmation, maybe it can be typed into the chat. If you are a prayer practitioner and want to hold this affirmation, not only for yourself, but for our community, we would appreciate it. We come into agreement that our prosperity and sustenance comes from our source, where there is no lack. We live in unlimited supply and claim it now for all. We come into agreement that our prosperity and sustenance comes from our source, where there is no lack. We live in unlimited supply and claim it now for all. Do remember to go to our YouTube page and subscribe. It's the quickest and easiest way to be kept abreast of any new postings that we put up on YouTube. As I mentioned, I've recently done a guided meditation on abundance. If you are experiencing any difficulties in that area in your life, you might find that meditation to be helpful to you. Please do remember to support our musicians that we've been featuring. It's by their generosity that we are able to share their music with you. And so today that was Faith Rivera and Karen Taylor Good. And do continue to share your financial support with the Unity Center to the extent that you can. It is needed now more than ever. The Unity Center is experiencing a hit from the financial situation that the pandemic has put so many of us in, and so your support does make a difference. And your support has helped us to be able to keep our staff on staff and not reduce their hours and not furlough our primary staff. It has helped us to be able to provide these services to you, as well as to reach out to our community. I don't know how many hundreds of wellness calls we've made. So even though it looks different now than it has in the past, we've been busy at work trying to provide spiritual nourishment to you. So if you can continue to support or even support more, please note that that does make a difference. You can do that on our app. It's quick and easy, the Unity Center app. You can download it wherever you get your apps. And so join me now and hold in your hand or in your mind's eye the gift that you are giving or the gift that maybe you've already given this month. And we bless this gift and this giving with this affirmation. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And say it softly with me. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And so it is. Amen. I sure do miss having our children lead us in our prayer of protection, which I'll be leading us in just a moment when we end. Please do know that even our youth village liaison, Beth Cormier, has been providing services and classes online, lessons online for our kiddos. So we're doing our best to support them as well. Let us close out now together with our prayer of protection. And please, wherever you go this weekend, if you're going to be out and about, please remember to practice compassion and mindfulness by social distancing and doing the things we've been asked to do, not just for yourself, but for others as well. It's a way to show compassion. Let us pray out together now. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, wherever we go, God is and all is well. And together we say, Amen. And so it is. God bless. See you next week.